Sir, news from the underground.
Brutality on street. Casualty is
Hello and welcome to The Underground. This is the podcast where we talk about the world and how crazy and weird and messed up it is. I'm your host, Duncan Michael McPherson. Today on the podcast, what I want to talk about is a new drug in the COVID-19 world that we're in that may offer, it's not a cure, but it seems like it might help in the fight against COVID-19. It's called Ivermectin. And it's showing promise. So I wanted to talk about it on the podcast. So the first thing I want to do is, I want to explain how this podcast started, because what happened is I posted just a quick thing on Facebook. I saw a picture of the Czech Republic with a graph that said ivermectin was implemented here, and, the cases of COVID go down from there. Okay. I didn't really look into it. I just posted it. And I even said in the post, I didn't really fact check this. I don't know how good this is. Whatever. I'm just sharing it, basically. So I posted it, whatever. Someone questioned it. And so I was like, okay, well, someone's questioning it. Maybe I should look into this more, because this might be very promising news that is not being reported on properly by the mainstream media. Because it doesn't fit the narrative of, vaccines are the only way out of this thing. And so there might be some validity to it that is going overlooked or, ignored completely. So I wanted to do some research. So I went to Google Scholar and I tried to find some studies on ivermectin. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about 3 studies that I saw, which... just the first 3 that popped up. Okay, I'm not like a professional fact checker. I'm not like a genius at statistics or reading, research or any of that stuff. I am just a normal person who likes to look into things and not just take people's word for it. I'm a skeptic. I'm a questioner. I'm a seeker of truth, I would like to think. So I just want to look at these articles and see what's going on. Because I've, with other things from mainstream media, I've looked at the articles and they're terrible studies. They're studies with massive flaws. And so I say I'm not an expert on studies or graphs or research or any of that stuff, but I am good at it. I did go to university for sociology, and, a lot of the research that I had to do for papers and things, I had to dig through some stuff. So, and a lot of sociology is looking at where are the flaws in a certain study or a certain survey or something like that. Where are the flaws, and where could, what does it actually tell us and what is it not telling us? What is being hidden by this study? So I think I'm pretty good at finding that stuff. So I went to Google Scholar, typed in ivermectin, and I got 3 different articles, okay? So I was specifically looking for articles that agreed that ivermectin was good and worked, and articles that didn't. So the first 2 articles said that it worked. They said that they talked favorably about ivermectin. The first, they both had I think it was 100 to 300 people in their sample sizes. So I was like, oh, that's kind of small. I'd like to get a bigger sample size, because I talked about in another podcast of the study about the plane with the masks. And one person on the plane had COVID. Everybody was wearing masks. Nobody got COVID. There's 150 people on the plane or whatever a plane fits, and therefore masks work. That's a terrible study. One, because the sample size is too small. 150 people does not tell you anything, especially with a disease that's only infecting, a small percentage of the population, right? As many cases as there are, it's still we're dealing with pretty small numbers. So it's really important to have a big sample size, not 150 people. That's a terrible study for that. But I already talked about that. So For this one, for 100 to 300 people, I'm like, that's really too small to really make any conclusive statements about it. I think I mean, it's good news. It shows promise, but it's not like conclusive evidence, at least to me. Okay. So then I wanted to find a study that said that was bigger, and I found a meta study that compiled a bunch of other studies, and it said that ivermectin did not work. So I was like, okay, maybe this is a hoax. Maybe ivermectin isn't working. So I looked into this study. Now, I'll admit, because of my own confirmation bias, I was like, I don't know if I trust this meta study saying that ivermectin doesn't work. So what I did was I looked into this meta study that was done. And when I read it, it was very interesting. I hope that I still have these saved on my phone, because I like to post them up here so you can see. But it said the meta study, the big study that said that ivermectin did not work, said something weird in it. It said it did not work, and the claims all studies used in this meta-analysis had a high risk of bias and showed very low certainty of the evidence. Now, I thought that was a weird thing to put into like a scientific paper, that they showed evidence of bias. I don't know. That was a red flag to me. So I looked into it, and so what I did was what I call lateral. Well, actually, I'm stealing this from John Green at Crash Course, but I called it lateral reading. So I wanted to look into the company that was publishing these papers. So I Googled them, just quick Wikipedia, like Google, which honestly, like, people talk a lot of shit about Wikipedia, but like Wikipedia is very reliable, I think. I know that you can change things on it, but man, everything on there is like shows its sources. I was just looking at a news article about something, and I wanted to see the source that they got it from. They were talking about a study, and they didn't actually put the study in the article. And I think they said the doctor's name that did this study, but they didn't actually put a link to the study, or even like a way to find the study. I don't even know what to search for it. So it just drives me crazy. At least Wikipedia puts their sources in there. So anyway, this is just a definition of the organization anyway. So what it said was the organization is called MedRxiv. And it said that MedRxiv is unpublished and not peer-reviewed. Okay. That's bad. That's not good for an academic study. So I threw out the, that study, as I was like, okay, well, if it's not peer-reviewed, that's really important. So I don't completely not trust it, but I'm like skeptical now. So I'm like, okay, well, to be fair, I used my confirmation bias to get here, right? I was biased in thinking that it wasn't true. So I should show the same, skepticism towards the ones that agreed with my opinion that ivermectin actually worked. So I looked at those. One of them, the first one that I looked at, that said ivermectin worked, was from something called SSRN, which uploads paper before publication and relies on the number of downloads to determine popularity. So also kind of problematic. I'm like, okay. So now it sounded like, and that was again from Wikipedia, but it sounded a lot like not so much that it was not peer reviewed, but just before it could be peer reviewed. So these are papers in like a earlier stage before they actually get to the peer reviewed stage. So more reliable, maybe, but still not peer reviewed. Okay, maybe I should throw that one out. If I'm going to throw the other one out, I should throw this one out too, right? To be fair. Okay, so then the second one that said ivermectin worked said it had a 73% reduction, which came from, so the study came from PLOS, PLOS1, PLOS1, which is a peer-reviewed open-access scientific journal published by the Public Library of Science. Okay, so this seems legit. This is peer-reviewed, and it's associated with the Public Library of Science, which I don't really know what that is, but sounds pretty legit. Anyway, it's peer-reviewed, and that was good enough for me. So I was like, okay, this is the most trustworthy one. So this is the one that I'm most likely to listen to and to accept as accurate, although still small sample size, one study out of hundreds of studies. No, not conclusive evidence, but this is the strongest evidence. And I was done looking after that. I mean, I was exhausted. I was frustrated with how many things I had to go through to figure all this out. So I wrote this all down because I was like, man, this is hard. You know what? I wanted to make a podcast about this because the one thing I wanted to get across was that research is hard. It's work. And it's not just like, oh, I looked at Facebook and this news article came up and now I know. You can't do that. And if you don't trust the news, which I don't, and I don't think anybody should just trust the news blindly, no matter what news source it is, whether it's the Daily Wire and it's right wing, or if it's CNN, it's left wing, I think that you should ask questions and you should look into what they're reporting on, because the main reason is that journalism has become this wild west of how do we get as many clicks as possible, right? A more sensationalized news, and we've had this problem for a long time, but it's gotten really bad with the rise of social media and the internet. But sensationalized news sells, right? So if I have a headline that says 10 people died and blah 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 blah, okay, well, that's gonna get more clicks, more likes, more shares than something that says, homeless lady saves dog from river, right? Maybe not. I don't know. That sounds pretty good too. But you know what I mean? If I said 90% of people survived blah blah blah, that doesn't sound as good as 10 people died or 10% of people died from blah blah blah, right? One sounds terrifying and one sounds hopeful. So my point is just, and that has nothing to do with COVID. I'm not using COVID numbers or anything, but I'm just trying to make a point that sensationalized news sells, and we all know this, right? So when I'm looking at this, I have to keep that in mind. When I'm looking at news articles and things like that, I have to keep this in mind, that sensationalism is always going to sell. And obviously, if it's not sensational, it's probably refuting something from the other side of the aisle, the other side of the political spectrum that is sensational, right? Which is what's happening here, right? One side saying ivermectin works. It's it could be a huge breakthrough for COVID-19. The other side saying, no, vaccines are the only way to go, and you should get your vaccine. And we all know which side is which, right? So anyway, the point I wanted to make, though, is just that research is difficult, but it's also necessary. I think that we need to look into things. We need to do research like I did on ivermectin, and hopefully maybe more in depth than mine. I've done some looking into it further, which is what I want to talk about next. But I think that we all need to get better at doing our own research and looking into things ourselves, because journalism has become very sensationalized, even more than it was before. And we can't just trust whoever. We have to look into things. I think it's essential. It's essential to knowledge, to truth, to finding truth, and to moving forward, and to making good decisions, as far as government or even for my own health or whatever. If I want to make good decisions, I need to do some research. And it's painful, it's hard, it's work, but it's necessary. So I wouldn't conclude that ivermectin works just from that. The sample size was really small, 76 control and 41 cases of, cases of COVID. I'm not sure. Anyway, not a big sample size. So I'd like to see more studies. And yeah, so that's all I want to say about that. Now, I want to look at, I did look into it a little bit more since then. Brett Weinstein and Heather Hang from the Dark Horse podcast talked about ivermectin and said something similar to this, but, like, one of the things that they talked about in that podcast was they talked about how it's being touted as the new hydroxychloroquine, which is the one that Trump was hopeful would work. And so, there's a hint that ivermectin equals Trump supporters, which is quite the stretch, but that's the implication that's supposed to get you to go, oh, ivermectin is nonsense, right? It's not going to win. It's not going to work. Now, I did find an article. Now, this is a pretty biased article because it's the Desert Review, which I don't even know what that is. I'm sure if I looked it up, it's right wing. So I think that's important to keep in mind. But in this article, they claim that one dose of ivermectin was all it took to get 81-year-old John Swanson off the ventilator. Okay. So there was some kind of court case with ivermectin involved. Anyway, so the bottom line. Oh, I wanted to read the quote that I used when I posted this article. Let me just find it here. Okay, so here's the quote, and obviously this is from a right wing news source. It's biased, so there's some problems with that, obviously. I think this is another point that I want to make, though. Everything you read is biased, whether it's from CNN, Washington Post, Fox News, Daily Wire, whatever news source you go to for your information. The Guardian, The Hill, the Wall Street Journal, they're all biased. They all have their own bias as individuals who are writing those pieces, but also as a company, as an organization. Where does their funding come from? They all have their own biases and their own reasons and incentives, right? Which is something that Brett Weinstein talks about in that Dark Horse podcast about how, the Pfizer and Moderna, these companies creating these vaccines and Big Pharma has a big incentive to get the vaccine selling, right? And this thing about patents with the vaccine, come on. There should be no patents on the vaccine. I heard Pope Francis just came out and said that the patents should be taken off this vaccine, at least. I don't know if he's meant more than this, but patents should have nothing to do with our healthcare system. And I understand there's problems with that, but this is a serious thing, and we need to know. First of all, we need to know that there's no ulterior motives, right? Financial incentives to push one vaccine over the other or one medication over another, the vaccines over the ivermectin. So that's really important to remember. But also, patents make sure that people get paid for their work. Well, we need this vaccine to save the world of this disease. I don't think it's going to save the world, but, if this was a more serious virus, especially, patents could get in the way of, I keep popping my P's. Patents could get in the way of people's safety, people living and dying. That's, all for some money. That's really what it comes down to. So anyway, I don't think the patent should be on vaccines, but anyway. So this article, like I said, very biased, but I don't know if that's very biased, to be honest. I just assume it is. Ivermectin is widely used by physicians, as there are now 51 studies from around the world, with 50 showing clear benefit and 1 showing neutral. However, the lone study showing a neutral effect was roundly criticized as flawed in an open letter signed by a group of 120 physicians. Like I said, bias. But if there's any validity to that, and from what I saw when I did my basic research on those 3 articles, that's the impression I got was that most of the articles, and I looked at the titles of others that seemed to suggest that ivermectin was effective. It was a little bit difficult to find one that said it wasn't effective. So, going back to that original post that I did not research at all, I just posted it. It had Czech Republic and it had ivermectin, it had the cases falling. Maybe that's real, maybe that's not. It doesn't really matter. The point is that I think ivermectin is an effective medicine to treat COVID. Now, one of the things that I read is that, of course, my mouse is not connected. Oh, there's another article, or maybe this is one of the ones that I looked up. But anyway, so ivermectin seems to be a good medicine to go to fight COVID. Now, my understanding of ivermectin is that it only mitigated some of the effects. So it helped with, I think, if it was given early and in severe cases, it helped deter COVID-19. Now, that's all it did. It did not stop people from getting it. It didn't. It just lowered the severity a little bit. So that's good, but it's not a cure or anything like that. It's not, some kind of miracle drug. So that's important to keep in mind too. Okay. I think that's really all I have to say about ivermectin. I want this podcast to be more about, are you doing your own research, or are you just trusting what other people tell you? Are you looking into things beyond just headlines? Are you asking questions about, like I say, everything's, got ulterior motives and things and incentives, but like every news organization has its own ulterior motives, its own incentives. Its funding comes from somewhere. And, if you're not asking questions and questioning whether these, the news story that you're reading is accurate, I think you're doing something wrong. I think you're doing something maybe even careless, I might say, by believing just whatever people say. So anyway, that's really all I got. Okay. I think that's everything. Do your research, look into things, ask questions. I think that is good for everyone. So anyway, this has been The Underground, the podcast where we talk about the world and how crazy and weird and messed up it is. My name is Duncan Michael McPherson. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. Share it on social media. Subscribe on the YouTube channel. That would be a huge help if you subscribe. And just share it with people. Hopefully you liked it and you find it balanced, and you'll share it because you thought it was good. So anyway, I'm Duncan Michael McPherson. God bless.
From the dark.